Good to come your way once again as we continue our journey in core mathematics. My name is Nana Ewedu, and you can call me Sir Nana. Ensure to share this video, like this video, comment at the comment section, and ensure to click on the notification bell and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get all the good videos that I'll put here. In our previous lesson, we've considered how we can measure angles and how we can bisect angles. In this lesson, we want to consider the types of angles. In fact, there are several types of angles. Once we meet them around us, we should be able to identify them and classify them under a type of angle. Now, let's consider the types of angles we have. So we have an acute angle. So look at these nice images. So we have a scissors here. Look at the opening of the scissors, right? We have our ice cream. Look at the cone part. It forms an angle. When we look at these shapes, we see an angle on this side and an angle here, right? And then look at the time. From 12 to 2, there's an angle here. The watermelon has an angle, and then the cheese, and then the pizza, right? So angles of these types are called acute angles. So we say that acute angles are angles that are actually greater than 0 degrees. So they are greater than 0 degrees. So we say that they are greater than 0 degrees, but then they are less than 90 degrees. So you could see that all these angles, they fall between angles that are greater than 0 degrees, but then are less than 90 degrees. So when we talk about acute, something that is acute, we are talking about something that is very small. So we are looking at angles that are greater than 0 degrees, but then they are less than 90 degrees. So for instance, if you have a 45-degree angle, you have a 30-degree angle, you have a 29-degree angle, you have an 89-degree angle, these are all acute angles. Now let's consider an obtuse angle. So look at this nice bed that have been tilted a little bit. The angle here is greater than 90 degrees, but it's also not an angle on a straight line, which is an angle which is 180 degrees, right? So any angle that is greater than 90 degrees, so greater than 90 degrees, but then it's less than 180 degrees, falls within an obtuse angle, right? So if you have an angle of 100 degrees, it's obtuse. 120 degrees is obtuse. 178 degrees is obtuse. 125 degrees, these are all obtuse angles. So angles that are greater than 90 degrees, but then they are less than 180 degrees are called obtuse angles. And then we see an obtuse angle in the angle that have been measured in the protractor here. So you see that they measure the angle from the 0 degrees up till when they went towards the 130 degrees. So this is 130 degrees, right? So we say that 130 degrees is obtuse. So an obtuse angle, as we define, is more than 90 degrees, but then it's less than what? 180 degrees. It means that it lies between 90 and 180 degrees. We can write it mathematically as 90 is less than x is less than 180 degrees, right? So we see that it's between 90 and 180. 90 is not part and 180 is not part. Now we also have a straight angle. So we know that when an angle is on a straight line, it forms an angle of 180 degrees. So a straight angle is always at 180 degrees, right? So anytime you see a straight angle, a line, remember that it forms an angle of 180 degrees. And then we have a right angle. So there are so many things around there. So like when you see the board, the edges of the board, as we looked at when we're considering the motivation for learning angles, the edges of the board forms an angle of 90 degrees. When you look at the clock from 12 to 3, you see an angle of 90 degrees. This book, the edge of the book forms an angle of 90 degrees. So a right angle is just a 90-degree angle. And we normally indicate it with a box at the side of the angle, right? So if this angle is A, this is B, this is C. We can say that the angle ABC is 90 degrees. So it's at right angle, right? And then we also have complementary angles and supplementary angles. So when we have two angles that add up to 90 degrees, right? When they add up to 90 degrees. So for instance, if I have 50 degrees plus 40 degrees, we know that that gives us 90 degrees. We say that that angle is complementary. So complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees, right? And then if you have two angles, so for instance, 120 degrees and then 60 degrees, right? And they add up to 180 degrees, then we'll say that that angle is supplementary. So 120 degrees plus 60 degrees will give us 180 degrees. So complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees, and supplementary angles are angles that add up to 180 degrees. And then we'll consider angles at a point. So remember that anytime you have a point, so like anytime you have a circle, we could see that we can form an angle at a point in a circle, right? That angle at the point add up to 360 degrees. So angle at a point is at 360 degrees. It's important to know the different types of angles because it will help you so that at the end of the day, when you find questions, you'll be able to know which type of angle it is, and then you'll be able to determine how to solve it based on the type of angle. So in this lesson, we basically looked at the types of angles. In our next lesson, we will consider parallel lines and perpendicular lines, and we'll look at how they relate with angles. Remember to share this video, like the video, comment, and then ensure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, STEM with Senana. See you in the next lesson.